The rain hammered against the broken windows of the abandoned gas station on Route 66, where Maya clutched her swollen belly and tried to stop shaking. 3 hours ago, she'd discovered her fiancé emptying their joint account. 2 hours ago, she'd found him in bed with her sister. 1 hour ago, he'd thrown her engagement ring at her face and told her the baby wasn't his problem anymore. Now she sat alone with nothing but the clothes on her back and $47 to her name. Maya wasn't just any desperate woman. She was a former child prodigy who'd graduated MIT at 19, built a tech empire by 24, and lost everything when she trusted the wrong person with her heart and her business. The baby growing inside her represented the last piece of hope she had left. The roar of a motorcycle engine cut through the storm. Through the rain-streaked glass she saw him, a lone biker with Hell Angels patches, his bike gleaming like a weapon in the lightning. Most people would run from a man like that. But what Maya didn't know was that this stranger was about to become the most important person in her life. Could a man society had written off become the hero she desperately needed? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The motorcycle's engine died with a mechanical sigh, leaving only the relentless drumming of rain against rusted metal. Maya pressed herself deeper into the shadows, her designer maternity dress, now soaked and torn, clinging to her trembling frame. The irony wasn't lost on her that 6 months ago she'd been featured on Forbes' 30 Under 30 list, and now she was hiding in an abandoned building like a frightened animal. Heavy boots splashed through puddles outside. Each footstep sent her heart racing faster, but she forced herself to think logically. This was just another problem to solve, another algorithm to decode. Except her usual tools, money, connections, influence, were gone. David had made sure of that when he'd manipulated her into signing over the patents to their shared company. She'd been so blinded by love, so desperate to prove she could balance career and relationship, that she'd handed him the keys to destroy her. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her distress. Maya whispered a quiet apology and placed both hands protectively over her belly. Whatever happened next, she had to think about more than just herself now. The footsteps stopped directly outside the broken entrance. Through a gap in the boarded-up doorway, she caught a glimpse of black leather and chrome chains. The man was massive, easily 6'4", with shoulders that could have been carved from granite. Tribal tattoos snaked up his neck, disappearing into a thick beard streaked with premature silver. Everything about him screamed danger. Maya held her breath, praying he would pass by. Instead, his voice cut through the storm, surprisingly gentle despite its gravelly depth. "I know you're in there." No threat in his tone, just simple statement of fact. "Saw you through the window when I pulled up." She remained silent, calculating her options. The back exit was blocked by debris, and there was nowhere to run even if she could move quickly in her condition. "Look, lady, I'm not gonna hurt you, but this storm's getting worse, and sitting in there isn't safe. Roofs half collapsed, and those support beams look ready to give way." As if summoned by his words, a chunk of ceiling plaster crashed down near Maya's feet. She flinched, inadvertently gasping. "There we go." His boots crunched on broken glass as he stepped inside, moving slowly with hands visible. "Jesus Christ, what are you doing out here?" Up close, he was even more intimidating. The Hell Angels patch on his leather vest was faded but unmistakable, surrounded by other insignia she couldn't decipher. His eyes, though, they weren't what she expected. Instead of the cold brutality she'd imagined, they held something almost protective. "Please," Maya's voice came out as barely a whisper. "I don't have anything valuable. Just leave me alone." He studied her for a long moment, taking in her expensive clothes, her obvious pregnancy, the desperate fear etched across her features. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Ma'am, I don't know what happened to you, but you can't stay here. There's a diner about 10 miles up the road. Clean, safe, open all night. Let me give you a ride." Maya almost laughed at the absurdity. Trust a Hell Angels biker? Get on his motorcycle while 7 months pregnant? It went against every survival instinct she possessed. But then lightning illuminated another section of collapsing ceiling, and the baby kicked again, harder this time. She thought about David's cruel laughter, her sister's satisfied smirk, the emptiness of her bank account. Sometimes the most dangerous choice was doing nothing at all. "Why would you help me?" she asked. The biker's expression grew distant, haunted. "Let's just say I know what it's like when the whole world turns against you." The rumble of the Harley's engine cut through the night air like a knife through silk. Mara pressed her face against the cool leather of the stranger's jacket, her tears mixing with the wind that whipped around them. Every mile they put between her and that house felt like another breath she could finally take. The motorcycle slowed as they approached the outskirts of town, pulling into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner that looked like it had been forgotten by time. Neon letters flickered weakly, spelling out Rosie's in pink and blue. The rider cut the engine, and suddenly the world felt too quiet. "You okay back there?" His voice was rougher than gravel, but there was something gentle in the way he asked. Mara realized she was still clinging to him like he might disappear. She loosened her grip and slid off the bike, her legs shaky beneath her. "I think so." He swung off the motorcycle with practiced ease, pulling off his helmet to reveal dark hair and eyes that seemed to see too much. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, and stubble covered the sharp angles of his face. He looked like trouble, but he'd been the one to pull her out of it. "Name's Ryder," he said, studying her with an intensity that made her self-conscious. "And you look like you could use some coffee and about 12 hours of sleep." Mara. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how she must look, tear-stained, wearing nothing but an oversized sweater and jeans, no shoes except for the slippers she'd grabbed on her way out. "I don't have any money. I can't pay for coffee or anything else." "Didn't ask you to." Ryder's tone was matter-of-fact as he started walking toward the diner. "Come on, you're going to catch pneumonia out here." The warmth inside Rosie's diner hit her like a wall. It smelled of bacon grease and coffee, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like trapped insects. A tired-looking waitress with graying hair looked up from behind the counter. "Hey there, Ryder. Usual spot?" "Thanks, Betty." He guided Mara to a booth in the back corner, away from the windows. Everything about his movements suggested this wasn't his first time needing to stay out of sight. Betty appeared with 2 steaming cups of coffee without being asked. "You want some pie, hun?" she asked Mara, her motherly concern evident. "You look like you need some sugar in your system." "She'll take whatever you've got that's warm," Ryder answered when Mara hesitated. "And maybe some of those scrambled eggs." When Betty left, silence stretched between them. Mara wrapped her hands around the coffee mug, letting the heat seep into her fingers. The baby chose that moment to flutter, a gentle reminder of the life growing inside her. She placed a protective hand over her stomach. Ryder's eyes tracked the movement. "How far along?" 5 months. The words came out barely above a whisper. "David, my husband, he found out tonight that it might not be his." "Might not be?" Mara's cheeks burned with shame. "There was someone else. Before David and I got back together after our separation. It was stupid and I was lonely and—" She trailed off, staring into her coffee. "David did the math. He thinks I lied to him about when it happened." "Did you?" The directness of the question startled her. Most people danced around uncomfortable truths. "No. But the baby came early according to the dates I gave him. Now he thinks—" She shrugged helplessly. "It doesn't matter what I say. He's made up his mind." Betty returned with a plate piled high with eggs, toast, and hash browns. The sight made Mara's stomach growl, reminding her she hadn't eaten since lunch. "Eat," Ryder commanded, sliding the plate closer to her. "You're feeding too." As she picked up the fork, Mara studied him. Leather jacket over a black t-shirt, jeans that had seen better days, boots that looked like they'd walked through hell, silver rings on 3 fingers and a chain around his neck that disappeared beneath his shirt. He looked like the kind of man her mother had warned her about. "Why did you help me?" she asked between bites. "You don't even know me." Ryder was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee mug in slow circles on the table. "Let's just say I know what it's like when the people who are supposed to protect you become the ones you need protecting from." Something in his voice told her there was a story there, probably one that would explain the scar and the way he constantly scanned the room like he expected trouble to walk through the door. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you eat, and then we figure out where you're going to sleep tonight that isn't a shelter or your car." "I don't have a car. David took my keys." Ryder's jaw tightened. Of course he did. The safe house turned out to be a run-down motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where broken neon signs buzzed intermittently and nobody asked questions. Maya clutched her purse tighter as Jax killed the engine, the sudden silence making her hyper-aware of every shadow in the parking lot. "This is temporary," he said, dismounting the bike with fluid grace, "just until I figure out what Marcus is planning next." Maya accepted his help getting off the motorcycle, her legs still shaky from adrenaline and pregnancy hormones. "How do you know my husband?" "Really know him, I mean." Jax's jaw tightened as he scanned the parking lot. "That's a conversation for inside." He pulled a key from his jacket pocket. "Room 12. I've been keeping it as a backup." The room smelled of stale cigarettes and industrial cleaning solution, but it was clean enough. Maya sank onto the edge of the bed while Jax checked the locks and pulled the curtains tight. In the harsh fluorescent light, she could see him clearly for the first time. Sharp cheekbones, a scar running from his left temple to his jaw, and eyes that held too much knowledge for someone who couldn't be older than 35. "You want the truth?" He turned to face her, crossing his arms. "Your husband owes money to some very dangerous people, more money than he has. Marcus doesn't gamble." The words came out automatically, a wife's defense. "No, but he does make deals with the wrong people when his back's against the wall." Jax's voice was matter-of-fact, not cruel. "He borrowed from the Kozlov family 6 months ago to cover some bad investments. The interest rate isn't exactly bank-friendly." Maya's hand moved instinctively to her belly. "How much?" 200,000, plus interest. The number hit her like a physical blow. Their savings account had maybe $15,000. "That's impossible. We don't have that kind of money." "I know." Jax sat in the room's single chair, studying her face. "That's why he tried to use you as collateral." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "What do you mean?" "The Kozlovs don't just deal in money, Maya. They traffic in people, women specifically." His voice remained steady, clinical. "Marcus offered them a trade. Your debt forgiven in exchange for you." She couldn't breathe. The fluorescent light above buzzed like an angry insect, and she could hear her pulse thundering in her ears. "You're lying." "Am I?" Jax leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Think about it. When was the last time he seemed worried about money? When did he start taking calls he wouldn't let you hear? When did he start suggesting you stay home more often?" Each question landed like a punch. Marcus had been different lately, secretive, controlling, insisting she quit her job at the bookstore because it was too stressful for the baby. She'd thought he was being protective, but tonight, she whispered. Tonight he changed his mind, called it off, said he couldn't go through with it. Jax's expression softened slightly. "The Kozlovs don't like it when people back out of deals. So they sent you to collect me anyway?" "No." He stood up, moving to the window to peer through a gap in the curtains. "They sent someone else. I intercepted." Maya stared at his back, trying to process what he was telling her. "Why? Why would you help me?" For a long moment he didn't answer. When he turned around, something vulnerable flickered across his features before disappearing behind his usual mask. "Because I know what it's like to be sold by someone who's supposed to protect you." The simple statement carried weight that made Maya's chest tighten. She wanted to ask more, but the haunted look in his eyes warned her off. Instead, she focused on the immediate crisis. What happens now? To Marcus, I mean. Honestly, nothing good. The Kozlovs will make an example of him. They can't let people think they can welch on deals without consequences. Despite everything, despite the betrayal that was still sinking in, Maya felt a stab of pain at the thought of Marcus being hurt. He was weak, apparently weaker than she'd ever imagined, but he was still the father of her child. And me, the baby? That depends. Jax returned to his chair, his movements careful and controlled. How badly do you want to disappear? What do you mean? I mean Maya Chen dies tonight. New identity, new life. Somewhere the Kozlovs will never find you. His eyes met hers steadily. It's the only way to keep you and the baby safe. The weight of the decision settled on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Everything she'd known, everyone she'd been, gone. But as she thought about the life growing inside her, about the kind of world Marcus had dragged them into, the choice became clearer. How? She asked quietly. For the first time since she'd met him, Jax almost smiled. Leave that to me. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting harsh shadows across Maya's face as she stared at the untouched plate of eggs growing cold before her. Her hands trembled around the coffee mug, steam rising between her fingers like ghostly whispers of the life she'd lost just hours ago. Across the cracked vinyl booth, Jake watched her with the intensity of a hawk monitoring wounded prey. He'd barely touched his own food, those steel-grey eyes constantly scanning the parking lot through the grease-stained window. Every time a car passed on the highway, his shoulders tensed, ready for flight or fight. "You need to eat," he said, his voice carrying the rough edges of too many cigarettes and hard choices. "Baby needs the nutrition." Maya's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, where the slight curve reminded her that she wasn't just running for her own life anymore. "I can't. Every time I try to swallow, I see Marcus's face when those bullets—" Her voice cracked like thin ice. Jake leaned forward, his leather jacket creaking with the movement. "Look at me." When she didn't respond, he reached across the table and gently lifted her chin with calloused fingers. "Marcus is gone. But you're not, and neither is that baby. You dishonor his memory by giving up now." The words hit her like a slap, shocking in their bluntness, but somehow exactly what she needed to hear. She blinked back tears and forced herself to take a bite of toast, the bread tasting like cardboard in her mouth. "Who were those men?" she whispered, glancing around the nearly empty diner. An elderly trucker nursed coffee at the counter, and a waitress with tired eyes refilled sugar dispensers, but otherwise they were alone. Jake's jaw tightened. People who don't forgive and don't forget. He pulled out a burner phone, its plastic case scarred with age. "I made some calls while you were in the bathroom. They're looking for you." "Hard." Maya's fork clattered against the plate. "What do you mean, looking for me? I don't even know what Marcus was involved in. I thought he worked in accounting for that construction company." A bitter laugh escaped Jake's throat. "Sweetheart, your husband was never an accountant. He was a cleaner for the Kozlov organization, made problems disappear." He paused, studying her shocked expression. "You really didn't know?" The diner seemed to tilt around her. 3 years of marriage, of believing she knew the man who kissed her goodbye every morning, who talked excitedly about nursery colors and baby names. That's impossible. Marcus wouldn't. He was gentle, kind. He rescued stray cats, for God's sake. The same hands that saved those cats also buried secrets that could destroy very powerful people. Jake's voice carried no judgment, only grim truth. "And now they think he might have told you something, or left something behind that could hurt them." Maya pressed her palms against her temples, feeling the world fracture around her like broken glass. "I don't know anything. I swear, I don't know anything. Doesn't matter what you know. Matters what they think you know." Jake slid a worn map across the table, routes marked in red ink. "We need to move. Every minute we stay in one place makes us easier to find." "We?" Maya looked up at him, this stranger who'd materialized from the darkness like some leather-clad guardian angel. "Why are you helping me? You could have just called the police and walked away." Jake was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the table in a nervous rhythm. Let's just say I owe Marcus a debt. He saved my life once, pulled me out of a situation that would have ended badly. His eyes grew distant. I was supposed to meet him that night, actually. If I'd been on time, you'd be dead too, Maya finished, understanding flooding through her. This isn't your fault. Maybe not, but keeping you alive is my responsibility now. He stood abruptly, throwing money on the table. Bathroom break, then we ride. There's a safe house about 200 miles north, run by someone who owes me a favor. As Maya slid out of the booth, her legs unsteady beneath her, she caught sight of herself in the diner's mirror. The woman staring back looked like a stranger, hollow-eyed, pale, wearing yesterday's clothes stained with her husband's blood. But beneath the shock and grief, something else flickered in her gaze, something that looked almost like determination. Outside, Jake's Harley waited like a steel predator in the parking lot. The machine seemed impossibly large and dangerous, all chrome and barely contained power. Maya had never been on a motorcycle in her life. I can't, she started to say, but Jake was already holding out a helmet. You can, he said simply, because the alternative is death, and I don't think Marcus would want that for his child. The night air cut through her thin sweater as she approached the bike, each step taking her further from the life she'd known and deeper into a world where survival meant trusting a stranger with everything she had left. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting harsh shadows across Maya's face as she stared at the untouched coffee growing cold between her hands. 3 hours had passed since Jake had pulled his motorcycle into the gravel parking lot of Mel's 24-hour diner, a relic from the 1950s that clung to the edge of nowhere like a forgotten promise. You need to eat something, Jake said, sliding back into the cracked vinyl booth across from her. He'd been making phone calls outside, his voice a low rumble through the windows as he paced beside his bike. The leather jacket hung loose on his broad shoulders, and Maya noticed how his eyes constantly swept the parking lot, the highway, the tree line beyond. I'm not hungry. The lie came easily, though her stomach had been cramping for the past hour. Everything felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's life unfold in slow motion. 12 hours ago, she'd been Mrs. David Hoffman, living in a pristine house in Westfield Heights, worried about nursery colors and baby names. Now she was a widow, a target, and apparently carrying evidence that could topple her husband's entire organization. Jake pushed a plate of scrambled eggs and toast toward her. Baby's hungry, even if you're not. The simple statement hit her like a physical blow. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly, where a slight curve had just begun to show beneath David's old Columbia sweatshirt. She'd grabbed it from his closet during their frantic escape, and now his cologne lingered faintly in the fabric, a ghost of the man she thought she'd married. How do you know about Marcus Chen? She asked, picking up a piece of toast with trembling fingers. The name had been haunting her since Jake mentioned it in the car. Jake's jaw tightened. Chen was my partner. DEA, deep cover in your husband's operation for 18 months. He paused, his dark eyes fixed on something beyond the window. Was being the operative phrase. They found his body in the Hudson River 3 weeks ago, tortured. David made sure he suffered before he died. Maya's stomach lurched, and she pressed her hand to her mouth. The toast fell forgotten to her plate. You're lying. David wouldn't. He couldn't. Your husband was a monster, Maya. Jake's voice was gentle but implacable, and the people he worked for are worse. They don't leave loose ends, and right now you're the loosest end they've got. Through the diner's windows, headlights swept across the parking lot. Jake's hand moved beneath his jacket with practiced speed, and Maya felt her heart slam against her ribs. But it was just a trucker pulling into the lot, his rig hissing as the air brakes engaged. Why are you helping me? The question had been building since he'd first appeared in her bedroom, and now it spilled out in a rush. If you're DEA, shouldn't you be arresting me or something? Jake was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the scarred Formica table. When he finally spoke, His voice carried a weight that made her chest tighten. "Because Chen talked about you. Said David had a wife who didn't know what kind of man she'd married. Said she was pregnant, that she made him cookies when he came to the house for meetings." His eyes met hers, and she saw something raw and painful flicker in their depths. "He was trying to find a way to get you out before it all came down. Before they—" He stopped, but Maya could fill in the blanks. "Before they killed her too. The flash drive," she whispered. "David was bringing it to you, wasn't he? To Marcus. Chen had been feeding us information for months, but we needed something concrete. Financial records, shipping manifests, something that could stand up in court. David was supposed to deliver it 3 weeks ago." Jake's hand closed into a fist on the table. "Instead, they killed Chen and made it look like a drug deal gone wrong." Maya thought about the last few weeks, how distracted David had been, how he'd startled at every unexpected sound. She'd assumed it was stress from work, but now she wondered if it had been guilt or fear. "He was going to run," she said, the realization hitting her like cold water. "That's why he had the cash, the passport. He was going to take the money and disappear. With you," Jake added. "The passport wasn't just for him." The truth settled over her like a shroud. David had loved her, in his way, enough to try to save her from the world he'd built, enough to die for it. Outside, the trucker finished his cigarette and climbed back into his cab. The diesel engine roared to life, and the 18-wheeler pulled back onto the empty highway, its taillights disappearing into the darkness. Maya watched it go and wondered if she'd ever feel safe again. "So what happens now?" she asked. Jake stood and dropped a 20 on the table. "Now we run." The morning sun filtered through the motel's thin curtains, casting long shadows across the worn carpet. Sarah stirred first, her hand instinctively moving to her belly as consciousness slowly returned. The events of the previous night crashed over her like a cold wave. Marcus, the gun, the desperate flight through rain-slicked streets. She turned her head, expecting to find the other bed empty, but Jake was there, sitting in the room's single chair. He'd positioned himself facing the door, his leather jacket draped over the chair's back, revealing muscled arms crossed over a black t-shirt. Dark stubble shadowed his jaw, and his eyes held the alertness of someone who'd slept lightly, if at all. "How long have you been awake?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "A while." He stood, moving with fluid grace toward the window. "We need to move soon. Your husband's people will be looking." The word, husband, sent a chill through her. Was Marcus still her husband? Could someone who'd pointed a gun at her, who'd revealed himself as a stranger wearing a familiar face, still claim that title? Where will we go? She struggled to sit up, wincing as her back protested. The baby kicked, as if sensing her distress. Jake turned from the window, his expression unreadable. "I know a place. Safe house about 3 hours north. Someone owes me a favor." "Why are you doing this?" The question hung between them like a bridge she wasn't sure she wanted to cross. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Something flickered across his features, a shadow of pain quickly masked. "Let's just say I know what it's like when the people who should protect you become the ones you need protection from." Before Sarah could respond, Jake's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening. "We need to go, now." "What is it?" "Marcus posted your picture on social media. Says you're missing, possibly kidnapped. He's got half the city looking for you." Jake grabbed his jacket, then paused. "There's something else. He's offering a reward." Sarah's blood turned to ice. Marcus was smart, painting himself as the concerned husband while mobilizing an army of strangers to find her. "How much?" 50,000. The number hit her like a physical blow. $50,000 would make even good people consider betraying a stranger. She watched Jake's face carefully, searching for any sign that the money had changed his calculations. "That's a lot of money," she said quietly. Jake met her eyes, his gaze steady. "Yeah, it is." He shouldered his jacket. "Good thing I don't need it." Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by guilt. She doubted him, this man who'd risked everything to help her escape. "Jake, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to—" "Don't apologize for being smart." He moved to the door, listening intently before turning back. Trust is earned, not given. I get that. They gathered their few belongings quickly. Sarah's hands shook as she folded the clothes Jake had bought her, each movement feeling surreal. 24 hours ago, she'd been planning nursery colors and debating baby names. Now she was a fugitive, dependent on a stranger's kindness. "There's a back exit," Jake said, peering through the curtains again. "My bike's around back." "The bike?" Sarah's hand moved protectively to her belly. "Is that safe?" "Safer than staying here." He pulled on his jacket, transforming back into the dangerous-looking man who'd first approached her. "Motorcycles can go places cars can't. We'll take it slow." They slipped out the back door into the crisp morning air. Jake's Harley sat waiting like a steel horse, chrome gleaming despite the circumstances. He handed her a helmet, then helped her onto the bike behind him. "Hold on tight," he said over his shoulder. "And Sarah, whatever happens, don't let go." The engine roared to life, vibrating through her body. As they pulled out of the parking lot, Sarah caught a glimpse of two black SUVs turning onto the motel street. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Did you see?" she started. "I saw." Jake's voice was grim. "They're faster than I thought they'd be." The bike accelerated smoothly, carrying them away from the approaching vehicles. Sarah pressed closer to Jake's broad back, her arms circling his waist. Through the leather of his jacket, she could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing, the controlled tension in his muscles. As they merged onto the highway, the city falling away behind them, Sarah allowed herself a moment of fragile hope. The baby shifted inside her, as if settling in for the journey ahead. She didn't know where they were going or what awaited them there. She didn't know Jake's full story or why he'd chosen to help her. But for the first time since Marcus had revealed his true nature, she felt something other than fear. Riding behind this enigmatic stranger, trusting him with her life and her child's future, she felt the faintest stirring of something that might eventually become hope. The road stretched ahead, carrying them toward an uncertain but possibly brighter future. The safe house sat tucked between a liquor store and a laundromat in a part of town where people minded their own business. Maya pressed her palm against her belly as Marcus guided her up the narrow staircase, the baby responding to her elevated heartbeat with restless movements. The building smelled of old wood and industrial detergent, but it felt like sanctuary compared to the exposed feeling of being on the road. "Third floor," Marcus said quietly, his hands steady on her lower back as she climbed. "Friend of mine owns the whole building. He doesn't ask questions." The apartment was sparse but clean, a studio with a kitchenette, a double bed, and a worn leather couch that had seen better decades. Heavy curtains blocked the windows, and Maya noticed the multiple locks on the door. This wasn't Marcus's first time needing to disappear. "You should rest," he said, setting her bag on the small table. "I need to make some calls, figure out our next move." Maya sank onto the couch, exhaustion hitting her like a physical weight. The adrenaline that had carried her through the night was finally wearing off, leaving her feeling hollow and shaky. "Our next move?" Marcus paused in his pacing, something flickering across his face. "I mean, your next move, getting you somewhere safe." The correction felt deliberate, like he was reminding himself of boundaries. Maya studied his profile as he moved to the window, carefully peering through a gap in the curtains. The morning light caught the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he held himself apart from her. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "You've already done more than—" "Those men last night," he interrupted, turning back to face her. "They weren't random thugs. They moved like professionals. How deep was Richard in with these people?" Maya's throat tightened. "I don't know. I thought I knew him, but—" She gestured helplessly. "Apparently I didn't know anything. The gambling, the debts, whatever else he was hiding. It was all news to me." Marcus nodded grimly. "Men like Richard, they think they can play in the big leagues without understanding the stakes. Problem is, when they go down, they take everyone around them with them, including innocent babies," Maya whispered, her hand moving protectively over her stomach. Something shifted in Marcus's expression, a crack in the careful walls he'd built around himself. He moved closer, crouching down beside the couch until they were at eye level. "Hey, nothing's going to happen to you or the baby, I promise." The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. "Why? Why are you doing this? You don't owe me anything." For a long moment, he didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with barely controlled emotion. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything in one night, to have your whole world ripped away because of someone else's choices." Maya reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing against his hand. The contact sent a jolt through both of them. He started to pull away, then stopped, his eyes meeting hers. "What happened to you?" she asked gently. Marcus stared down at their joined hands. "My sister. She got involved with the wrong guy, ended up in debt to people who don't forgive. I was deployed overseas when it happened. By the time I got back," he swallowed hard. "By the time I got back, it was too late to save her." Maya's heart clenched. "Marcus, I'm so sorry." "I swore I'd never let that happen again. Never stand by while someone innocent gets hurt because of another person's mistakes." His thumb traced across her knuckles. "When I saw you last night, saw those men coming for you, I couldn't walk away." The revelation hung between them, heavy with shared pain and understanding. Maya saw him clearly now, the leather and steel exterior hiding a man carrying tremendous guilt, trying to save her because he couldn't save the person who mattered most. "Your sister," Maya said quietly. "What was her name?" "Sarah." The name came out like a prayer. She was going to be a teacher, had this laugh that could light up a whole room. "She sounds wonderful." Marcus nodded, then seemed to catch himself, pulling his hand away and standing abruptly. "You should get some sleep. I'll take first watch." But Maya caught his wrist before he could retreat completely. "Marcus, thank you for telling me, for everything." He looked down at her, conflict written across his features. "Maya." "I know," she said softly. "I know this is complicated, but right now, you're all I have. And despite everything that's happened, despite how terrifying this all is, I trust you." The admission seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Get some rest," he repeated, but his voice was gentler now. "I'll be right here." As Maya curled up on the couch, she watched Marcus position himself by the window, a silent guardian keeping watch over her fractured world. The safe house sat tucked between an auto repair shop and a laundromat, in a part of town where people minded their own business. Maya pressed her palm against her belly as Jake cut the engine, the baby responding to her touch with a gentle flutter that somehow made everything feel both more fragile and more urgent. "This is it," Jake said, scanning the empty street before stepping off the bike. His movements were careful, calculated, the same way he'd been riding for the past hour, taking random turns and doubling back to ensure they weren't followed. Maya accepted his help dismounting, her legs unsteady after the long ride. The leather jacket he'd given her hung loose around her frame, still warm with his body heat and smelling of motor oil and something indefinably masculine that made her feel safer than she had any right to. The building looked abandoned from the outside, its windows dark and covered with newspaper. But Jake produced a key from his pocket and led her to a side entrance she hadn't even noticed. The door opened into a narrow hallway that smelled of fresh paint and cleaning supplies. "Jake?" A woman's voice called from somewhere ahead, cautious but warm. "It's me, Diane. I've got her." The woman who appeared at the end of the hallway looked nothing like what Maya had expected. Instead of another leather-clad biker, Diane was perhaps 50, with graying hair pulled back in a neat ponytail and wearing scrubs decorated with cartoon cats. Her face was kind but sharp-eyed as she took in Maya's appearance. "Oh, honey," she said, immediately moving to Maya's other side. "Let's get you sitting down. How far along are you?" 7 months, Maya managed, allowing herself to be guided into a surprisingly comfortable living space. The contrast between the building's exterior and this warm, well-appointed apartment was jarring. "Good timing, then. Not too early, not too late if we need to move quickly. Diane spoke with the practical efficiency of someone accustomed to crisis situations. I'm a nurse, she explained, catching Maya's questioning look. Retired but old habits. Jake stood by the window, peering through a gap in the newspaper covering. Any word from Marcus? He called an hour ago. Says Vincent's been making calls, calling in favors. This isn't going away quietly. Diane was already checking Maya's pulse, her professional demeanor taking over. When did you last eat, dear? Maya had to think about it. The last 24 hours felt like a blur of terror and adrenaline. Yesterday morning, I think. Jake, Diane's voice carried a note of gentle scolding. This girl needs food and rest, not whatever war council you're planning in your head. He turned from the window, and Maya caught something in his expression. Guilt, maybe, or frustration at his own oversight. I'll get something from the deli next door. No. Diane was already moving toward what Maya could see was a well-stocked kitchen. You stay put. The less you're seen around here, the better. I've got everything we need. As Diane busied herself preparing food, Jake settled into a chair across from Maya, his leather jacket creaking softly. Without the immediate urgency of escape, the space between them felt different, more intimate, charged with unspoken questions. How do you know her? Maya asked quietly. Diane? She patched me up a few times when I was younger and stupider. Her son rode with us before he got clean, went back to school. Jake's fingers drummed against his knee, a nervous habit she was beginning to recognize. She helps people who need to disappear for a while. People like me. People who deserve better than what they're running from. The simple sincerity in his voice made her throat tight. Maya studied his face, trying to reconcile the gentle man sitting across from her with the dangerous stranger who'd appeared in her garage. Why are you doing this? Really? Jake was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. My sister used to ask me that. Why I couldn't just walk away from people's problems, mind my own business like a smart person would. Used to? Cancer took her 3 years ago. His voice roughened slightly. She was pregnant when she got diagnosed. Had to choose between treatment and the baby. Maya's breath caught. What did she do? Chose her daughter. Emma's 6 now. Lives with my parents in Oregon. Jake's hands stilled. Sarah made me promise to look out for people who couldn't look out for themselves. Said it was the only way her choice meant anything. Diane appeared with a steaming bowl of soup and a sandwich cut into neat triangles. Enough heavy talk for now, she said firmly, though her eyes were soft as she looked between them. This little one needs nourishment, and so does Mama. As Maya ate, she watched Jake move restlessly around the room, checking locks, testing window latches, his protective instincts clearly on high alert. She was beginning to understand that beneath the leather and attitude was a man driven by love and loss in equal measure. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, as if responding to the promise of safety that felt, for the first time in days, like it might actually be real. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams, its fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across cracked vinyl booths. Maya sat across from Jake, her hands wrapped around a cup of lukewarm tea, trying to steady the tremor that had started in her fingers and worked its way through her entire body. 3 days had passed since they'd fled the city, 3 days of constant movement and looking over their shoulders. We can't keep running forever, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ancient refrigerator behind the counter. Jake's jaw tightened as he studied the parking lot through the grimy window. His leather jacket was draped over the back of his chair, revealing arms marked with scars that told stories she was only beginning to understand. Running's kept us alive so far. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if protesting their nomadic existence. Maya winced, placing a protective hand over her swollen belly. At 7 months pregnant, every mile on the back of Jake's motorcycle felt like torture, but the alternative was worse. Marcus's reach extended far beyond what she'd ever imagined, his network of corrupt cops and criminal contacts turning every city into a potential trap. There's something I haven't told you, Jake said suddenly, his voice so low she had to lean forward to hear him. His eyes remained fixed on the window, watching for threats that seemed to lurk around every corner. Maya's heart skipped. After everything they'd been through, she thought they'd moved past secrets. What? Marcus isn't just some abusive husband with connections. He's part of something bigger. Jake finally met her gaze, and she saw fear there, real bone-deep fear that made her stomach clench. The trafficking ring I've been trying to bring down? He's one of the key players. The words hit her like a physical blow. Maya felt the blood drain from her face as pieces of a horrific puzzle began clicking into place. The late-night phone calls Marcus would take in his study, the unexplained income that funded their lavish lifestyle, the young women who would sometimes appear at his business functions looking lost and terrified. "That's why he wants me back," she breathed, the full weight of her situation crashing down on her. "I know too much." Jake nodded grimly. "And that's why they'll never stop hunting you." Or the baby. The baby. Their baby, if the timing was right. Maya had done the math a dozen times, counting back to that night when grief and desperation had driven her into Jake's arms. The night before Marcus discovered their affair and everything went to hell. "We need help," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. "People we can trust. Trust is a luxury we can't afford." Jake's hand moved instinctively to the gun concealed beneath his jacket. Everyone has a price, and Marcus has deep pockets. The bell above the diner's entrance chimed, and both of them tensed as a state trooper walked in. Jake's hand inched toward his weapon while Maya tried to make herself invisible in the booth. The officer ordered coffee to go, making casual conversation with the waitress about road conditions and weather. Normal conversation that felt like a death sentence. Minutes stretched like hours until the trooper finally left. Only then did Maya realize she'd been holding her breath. "We leave now," Jake murmured, dropping a 20 on the table, enough to cover their bill and ensure the waitress's silence, they hoped. Outside in the parking lot, Maya struggled to climb onto the motorcycle. Her changing body made the simple act feel impossible, and tears of frustration pricked at her eyes. Jake's hands were gentle but urgent as he helped her settle behind him. "I know this is hard," he said over his shoulder as the engine roared to life. "But I promise you, I won't let anything happen to you or the baby." As they pulled back onto the empty highway, Maya pressed her face against Jake's leather-clad back and tried to believe him. The wind whipped through her hair, carrying away her tears and fears for precious moments. Behind them, their past burned like a funeral pyre. Ahead lay uncertainty and danger, but also the slim possibility of freedom. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, as if responding to the vibration of the motorcycle. Maya placed both hands on her belly, feeling the life growing inside her, innocent and pure, untouched by the violence and corruption that had shaped both her and Jake's worlds. She thought about the woman she'd been just weeks ago, pampered, naive, living in willful ignorance of the monster she'd married. That woman was gone, burned away by betrayal and terror. In her place sat someone harder, someone who could shoot a gun and sleep in fleabag motels without complaint, someone who would do whatever it took to protect her child. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, leading them toward an uncertain dawn. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Maya felt something stirring in her chest that might have been hope. The safe house sat nestled between towering pines, its weathered cedar siding blending seamlessly with the forest shadows. Maya pressed her face against the passenger window as Jake's Harley crunched up the gravel driveway, her breath fogging the glass. After 3 days of running, of looking over their shoulders at every gas station and diner, this place felt like a mirage. "It belongs to an old army buddy," Jake said, killing the engine. "Tommy owes me more favors than he can count. We'll be safe here." Maya's legs trembled as she dismounted the bike, her body protesting after hours of riding. The baby had been restless all morning, pressing against her ribs as if sensing her anxiety. She placed both hands on her belly, whispering words of comfort she wasn't sure she believed. The cabin's interior surprised her, warm hardwood floors, a stone fireplace, and windows that overlooked a pristine lake. It was nothing like the dingy motels they'd been hiding in. Jake moved through the space with practiced efficiency, checking locks, testing the landline, surveying sight lines from each window. "There's a boat dock out back," he said, peering through kitchen blinds. "Emergency exit if we need it." Tommy keeps a speedboat gassed and ready. Maya sank into a leather armchair, exhaustion weighing her down like a physical force. "How long can we stay?" "As long as it takes." Jake's jaw tightened. "I made some calls last night. Marcus has half the city looking for us, but he's also getting sloppy, desperate. That's when men like him make mistakes." She watched him pace the living room, his movements sharp and purposeful, despite the fatigue she knew he must be feeling. 3 days ago, she'd known nothing about this man except his reputation for violence. Now she'd seen him handle her morning sickness with surprising gentleness, watched him count and recount their dwindling cash while she slept, felt the way his body curved protectively around hers during the cold mountain nights. "Jake." Her voice came out smaller than intended. "What happens after? Even if we stop Marcus, what kind of life can I give this baby? I have nothing left." He stopped pacing, his back to her. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant call of loons on the lake. When he finally turned, something had shifted in his expression, a vulnerability she'd glimpsed only in unguarded moments. "My old man used to beat the hell out of me," he said quietly. "Every night, for any reason or no reason at all. My mother would patch me up afterward, tell me she was sorry, promise she'd leave him, but she never did." Maya's breath caught. He'd never spoken about his past, not like this. "I swore I'd never be him, never bring a kid into that kind of chaos." Jake ran a hand through his dark hair. "But watching you these past few days, seeing how you talk to the baby even when you're scared out of your mind, you're nothing like her. Nothing like them." The baby chose that moment to kick hard against Maya's palm, as if responding to Jake's words. She gasped, placing her other hand beside the first. "Here," she said softly. "Feel." Jake hesitated, then crossed the room and knelt beside her chair. His calloused hand was warm and surprisingly gentle as she guided it to the spot where their child moved beneath her skin. His eyes widened when the baby kicked again, stronger this time. "Jesus," he breathed. "Is it always like that? Getting stronger every day?" Maya covered his hand with hers. "The doctor said babies can hear voices outside the womb, recognize them after they're born." Something raw and unguarded flickered across Jake's features. For a moment, the dangerous biker disappeared entirely, replaced by a man confronting something he'd never dared to want. The moment shattered when his phone buzzed against the coffee table. Jake's hand jerked away as if burned, his walls slamming back into place. He grabbed the device, checking the display. "Tommy," he answered curtly. "What you got?" Maya watched his face change as he listened, jaw muscles ticking with tension. "How many?" A pause. "When?" Another pause, longer this time. "We'll be ready." He ended the call and met her eyes, the brief intimacy between them replaced by grim determination. "Marcus found the last motel. He knows we're headed north, but not exactly where." Jake was already moving toward their bags. "Tommy's got intel on Marcus's operation, locations, schedules, the works. But we need to move tonight if we want to end this." Maya struggled to her feet, one hand braced against her lower back. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we stop running." Jake's voice carried steel and finality. "Tomorrow, we finish this fight, one way or another." Outside, storm clouds gathered over the lake, and Maya felt the baby shift restlessly inside her, as if sensing the approaching tempest. The safe house sat nestled between towering pines, its weathered log exterior blending seamlessly with the forest around it. Maya pressed her face against the truck's passenger window, watching shadows dance between the trees as Jax navigated the winding dirt road. Her hand rested protectively over her belly, where the baby had been unusually active since they'd left the motel. "How much further?" she asked, trying to keep the exhaustion from her voice. "We're here." Jax pulled into a clearing where the cabin emerged from the darkness like something from a fairy tale. Warm light spilled from its windows, and smoke curled lazily from the stone chimney. Before Maya could unbuckle her seatbelt, the front door opened, and a woman appeared on the porch. She was tall and lean, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the kind of confident stance that suggested she could handle whatever trouble walked through her door. "That's Stella," Jack said, killing the engine. "She saved my life more times than I can count." Maya studied the woman as they approached. Stella's weathered hands and keen eyes spoke of someone who'd seen her share of hard living, but her smile was genuine and warm. "Jackie boy," Stella said, pulling Jax into a fierce hug. "About time you brought someone decent around here." She turned to Maya with an appraising look that somehow managed to be both protective and welcoming. "You must be Maya. Come on, honey, let's get you fed and settled." The cabin's interior was a study in comfortable practicality. Handmade quilts draped over sturdy furniture, books lined the walls, and the scent of something delicious wafted from the kitchen. Maya felt some of the tension leave her shoulders for the first time in days. "Sit," Stella commanded, guiding Maya to a chair near the fireplace. "You look like you haven't had a proper meal in weeks." "We've been moving fast," Jack said, settling onto the couch across from Maya. The distance felt deliberate, and she found herself missing the easy closeness they'd developed on the road. Stella bustled around the kitchen, returning with steaming bowls of stew and thick slices of homemade bread. "Eat first, talk later. That's my rule." Maya hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first spoonful hit her tongue. The stew was rich and hearty, exactly what her body craved. She ate in grateful silence while Stella and Jax caught up in the shorthand of old friends. "How bad is it?" Stella asked quietly. "Bad enough," Jax replied. "They burned down her apartment, shot up the motel where we were staying. Rodriguez won't stop until she's dead." Maya's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. Hearing it laid out so starkly made the reality hit fresh. Someone wanted her dead badly enough to hunt her across state lines, and she still didn't fully understand why. "The flash drive," she said suddenly. Both Jax and Stella turned to her. "David left it for me, but I still don't know what's on it. Maybe if we knew what Rodriguez was really after." "Oh, maybes about it," Stella interrupted. "We need to know what we're dealing with." She disappeared into another room and returned with a laptop. "Let's have a look." Maya retrieved the drive from her purse with trembling fingers. The small device had caused so much chaos, had turned her life upside down and put Jax in danger. Part of her wanted to throw it in the fire and pretend none of this was happening. Jax moved to sit beside her as Stella inserted the drive. His presence steadied her, and she found herself leaning slightly into his warmth. The laptop screen filled with folders of documents and video files. "Financial records," Stella murmured, clicking through the files. "Bank transfers, shell companies. Jesus, this goes deep." A video file caught Maya's attention. The timestamp showed it was recorded just days before David's death. With a sick feeling in her stomach, she clicked play. David's face filled the screen, but this wasn't the man she'd married. He looked haggard, frightened, years older than his age. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his hands shook as he adjusted the camera. "Maya, if you're watching this, then I'm probably dead." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry, baby. I never meant for any of this to touch you or the baby. I thought I could handle it, thought I could get us out clean." Maya's breath caught. Beside her, she felt Jax tense. "Rodriguez has been using the construction company to launder money for the cartel. Millions of dollars, Maya. When I found out, I should have walked away, but I was scared. Scared of what he'd do to us if I tried to leave. So I started copying everything, thinking maybe I could use it as insurance." The video David continued, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I was wrong. He found out, and now he wants the evidence destroyed and anyone who's seen it eliminated. That includes you." The screen went black, leaving the three of them sitting in stunned silence. The safe house felt smaller each day, its walls closing in like a fist. Maya pressed her palm against the window, watching droplets of rain trace lazy paths down the glass. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus brought her here, and the isolation was beginning to fray her nerves. The baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing her restlessness. "You're going to wear a hole in that floor," Marcus said from the doorway, his voice carrying that familiar hint of amusement that had become her anchor in this storm. She turned, taking in his appearance. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually confident posture sagged with exhaustion. He'd been pushing himself too hard, she knew, splitting his time between tracking down leads on Victor's operation and ensuring their hideout remained secure. "Any word from Tommy?" she asked, though she already knew the answer from his expression. Marcus shook his head, running a hand through his hair. Radio silence. Could mean he's deep undercover, or... He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung heavy between them. Maya moved away from the window, her hand instinctively finding his arm. The contact sent electricity through her fingertips, a sensation that had grown stronger with each passing day. "He's smart. He'll find a way to get word to us." "Maybe." Marcus's jaw tightened. "But we can't keep waiting. Victor's getting bolder. 2 more witnesses turned up dead yesterday, and the cops are asking questions they shouldn't be asking yet." The weight of responsibility pressed down on Maya's shoulders. Every day they remained hidden was another day Victor consolidated his power, eliminated threats, covered his tracks. But every day also brought her closer to giving birth, closer to bringing an innocent life into this chaos. "There's something else," Marcus continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I got word from an old contact. Victor's put a bounty on both our heads. 50 grand for you, 25 for me." Maya's blood turned to ice. "That's enough to make anyone desperate, which is why we need to move. Tonight." Before she could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the house. They both froze, every muscle tensing. Marcus was already reaching for the gun tucked into his waistband when the sound came again, deliberate, rhythmic knocking. 3 short, 2 long, 3 short again. Marcus's shoulders relaxed slightly. Tommy's signal, but his hand remained on his weapon as he moved toward the front door. Maya followed, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the peephole, Marcus confirmed what they both hoped to see. He unlocked the deadbolts, and Tommy stepped inside, rain-soaked and grim-faced. "Jesus, you look like hell," Marcus said, but relief colored his words. Tommy managed a weak smile. "Feel worse than I look." His clothes were torn, and dried blood crusted a cut above his left eyebrow. "Victor's planning something big. Tomorrow night." "What kind of something?" Maya asked, though she dreaded the answer. "A meeting. All the major players, including some dirty cops and a judge. They're restructuring the entire operation, dividing up territories, planning how to handle the investigation." Tommy's eyes found Maya's. "And they're planning to tie up loose ends permanently." The baby chose that moment to kick hard, making Maya gasp and press both hands to her belly. Both men immediately moved toward her, concern etched on their faces. "I'm okay," she assured them, though the timing felt ominous. "Where's this meeting happening?" "Warehouse District. Same place where—" Tommy trailed off, but Maya understood. The same place where David had died, where her old life had ended in blood and betrayal. "It's a trap," Marcus said flatly. "Has to be. Victor knows you've been feeding us information." Tommy nodded grimly. "Probably, but it's also our only shot. Everyone will be there, including Victor himself. We take them down tomorrow night, or we spend the rest of our lives running." Maya sank into a chair, the magnitude of their situation settling over her like a laid blanket. Tomorrow night would determine everything, whether they could build a life together or whether they'd become just another casualty in Victor's wake of destruction. "What about backup?" she asked. "Surely there are cops we can trust." "A few," Tommy admitted, "but not enough. This is going to come down to us." Marcus moved to stand behind Maya's chair, his hands settling gently on her shoulders. The warmth of his touch steadied her racing pulse. "We've come this far," he said softly. We finish it tomorrow." Outside, thunder rumbled across the sky, and Maya wondered if it was an omen or a promise. Either way, she knew their sanctuary was about to become a memory. Tomorrow night, one way or another, this would all be over. The baby kicked again, gentler this time, and Maya closed her eyes, drawing strength from the life growing inside her. They would end this, for her child's future. They had to. The warehouse smelled of rust and decades-old motor oil, but it was the safest place Marcus could think of on short notice. Sarah sat on an overturned crate, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee that one of Marcus's crew had brought her. The harsh fluorescent lights cast deep shadows under her eyes, making her look fragile and exhausted. "We can't stay here long," Marcus said, pacing near the entrance where he'd positioned 2 lookouts. "Victor's people will canvass every building in a 10-mile radius." Sarah nodded, though her mind felt sluggish. The events at the hospital seemed surreal now, like something from a nightmare she couldn't quite shake. "The baby's okay?" she asked for the 3rd time in an hour. "The baby's fine," Marcus assured her, his voice gentler than usual. "But we need to move soon." Tank approached from the far corner of the warehouse, where he'd been working on something Marcus couldn't see. "Got it," he announced, holding up what looked like a modified cell phone. "Untraceable GPS, emergency beacon, and it'll jam any tracking signals within a 50-foot radius." Marcus took the device, impressed despite everything. "How long did this take you?" "Had the parts lying around," Tank shrugged. "Been working on it since we left the hospital." Sarah watched their interaction with growing amazement. These men, who she'd initially feared, were risking everything for her. They barely knew her, yet here they were, crafting specialized equipment and preparing to face dangerous enemies on her behalf. "Why are you doing this?" she asked suddenly, the question hanging in the air. Marcus stopped pacing. Tank busied himself with gathering his tools. The other crew members, scattered throughout the warehouse, pretended not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. "Because it's right," Marcus said finally. "Because Victor's a cancer that needs cutting out. And because—" he trailed off, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Because what?" "Because you matter," he said simply. "You and the baby, more than you know." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. There was something in his voice, something vulnerable beneath the tough exterior he maintained. She'd been so focused on survival that she hadn't allowed herself to examine the growing connection between them. Tank cleared his throat loudly. "Hate to interrupt, but we've got company." Everyone in the warehouse tensed. Marcus moved to the window, peering through a crack in the boards they'd used to cover it. 3 black SUVs sat at the far end of the street, engines running. "They're not moving," Marcus observed. "Just watching, waiting for backup," suggested Razor, one of Marcus's younger crew members. "Or trying to figure out if we're actually in here," Tank added. Marcus weighed their options. The warehouse had 2 exits, but both could be easily covered if Victor's people positioned themselves correctly. They had maybe 10 minutes before the net tightened completely. "There's a storm drain that connects to the old subway tunnel," Tank said, reading Marcus's thoughts. "Access panels in the floor over there. Comes out 6 blocks north." "Can Sarah make it?" Marcus asked, glancing at her rounded form. "I can make it," Sarah said firmly, standing up. "Just tell me where to go." Marcus felt a surge of admiration for her determination. Throughout this entire ordeal, she'd shown remarkable strength. He'd protected plenty of people over the years, but none who'd faced danger with such quiet courage. Tank pried up a metal panel in the floor, revealing a narrow concrete passage below. "It's not pretty," he warned, "about a 1/4 mile of crawling through tight spaces." "Better than whatever Victor has planned," Sarah replied grimly. Marcus helped her down into the tunnel first, then followed with Tank bringing up the rear. The other crew members would scatter, leading Victor's people on false trails throughout the city. The tunnel was worse than Tank had described. Barely 3 feet high in places, with standing water and the skittering sounds of unseen creatures. Sarah moved steadily forward, guided by the small flashlight Marcus held ahead of her. "You're doing great," he murmured, as they navigated a particularly narrow section. "No choice," she panted, but she squeezed his hand gratefully when he helped her over a pile of debris. They emerged 20 minutes later in an abandoned subway station, breathing hard and covered in grime. Marcus immediately checked the modified phone Tank had given him. No tracking signals, and their position looked clear. "Now what?" Sarah asked, leaning against a tiled wall. Marcus studied her face in the dim light filtering down from street level. She trusted him completely, he realized. Despite everything she'd been through, despite the danger still hunting them, she looked at him with absolute faith. "Now we disappear," he said. "At least until we can figure out how to end this permanently." "Together?" she asked quietly. Marcus met her eyes. "Together." The safe house felt smaller with Marcus's absence, every shadow seeming to hold potential threats. Elena pressed her back against the kitchen counter, one hand protectively cradling her belly while the other gripped the burner phone Marcus had left behind. 3 hours had passed since he'd roared away on his Harley, promising to return before midnight. The baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing her anxiety. Elena whispered soothing words, though she wasn't sure if they were meant for the child or herself. The documents Marcus had shown her earlier lay scattered across the coffee table like pieces of a deadly puzzle. Financial records, shipping manifests, photographs of her late husband with men whose faces she recognized from news reports about organized crime. How had David hidden this from her so completely? Every shared meal, every gentle kiss goodnight, every excited conversation about their future child had been built on lies. The man she'd mourned, whose loss had left her broken and vulnerable, had never truly existed. A car engine rumbled in the distance, growing closer. Elena's pulse quickened as she moved to the window, careful to stay behind the curtain. Not Marcus's motorcycle. A black sedan crept down the street, its tinted windows reflecting the streetlights like dead eyes. The engine stopped. Elena's breath caught in her throat as 2 figures emerged from the vehicle. Even in the dim light, she recognized the lean silhouette of Vincent Torino, David's former business partner. The man beside him was broader, his hand resting casually inside his jacket. They knew where she was. Moving as quietly as possible, Elena grabbed the documents from the coffee table and stuffed them into the bag Marcus had prepared for emergencies. Her movements felt clumsy, her pregnant body unwieldy as adrenaline flooded her system. The baby seemed to sense the danger, movements becoming more agitated. The front door handle rattled. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as she slipped toward the back of the house. Marcus had shown her the escape route on her first day here, though she'd prayed she'd never need to use it. The back bedroom window opened onto a fire escape that led to the alley behind the building. Glass shattered in the front room. "Elena Castellano." Vincent's voice carried through the house, smooth and patient. "We know you're here. Let's discuss this like civilized people." Elena eased the bedroom window open, wincing at the slight squeak of old hinges. The fire escape felt solid beneath her feet, but the descent seemed impossibly steep with her shifted center of gravity. She gripped the metal railing tightly, taking each step with careful precision. "Your husband made some promises before his unfortunate accident," Vincent continued, his voice growing closer. "Promises that need to be kept." The alley stretched in both directions, poorly lit and lined with dumpsters that could provide cover. Elena chose the path that would take her toward the main street where Marcus had said to go if anything went wrong. Each step sent a sharp pain through her lower back, but she pushed forward. Behind her, she heard Vincent's curse as he discovered the open window. "Find her." Elena pressed herself behind a dumpster as footsteps echoed on the fire escape. The smell of rotting garbage made her stomach lurch, but she forced herself to remain still. The baby's movements had calmed, as if understanding the need for silence. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Elena's hands shook as she checked the screen, hoping for word from Marcus. Instead, an unknown number displayed a simple message: "The pier. 1 hour. Come alone or the biker dies." Below the text was a photograph that made Elena's blood turn to ice. Marcus, bound and bloodied, slumped against what looked like a warehouse wall. His eyes were closed, a dark bruise spreading across his jaw. "She's not in here," called a voice from the building above. "Check the street cameras," Vincent replied. "She can't have gone far in her condition." Elena forced herself to think clearly despite the panic clawing at her chest. Marcus had been captured because of her, because he'd tried to protect her. The man who'd asked for nothing but had given everything was now paying the price for her husband's sins. The alley's exit beckoned, promising safety if she could just reach the busy street beyond, but that would mean abandoning Marcus to whatever fate Vincent had planned. The same Marcus who'd held her when nightmares woke her, who'd assembled a crib with inexpert but determined hands, who'd looked at her growing belly with a wonder that seemed to surprise him. The baby kicked once, sharply, as if making its own opinion known. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision settle around her like a shroud. She thought of David's betrayal, of the life growing inside her, of the man who'd become her unexpected salvation. Some choices weren't really choices at all. She stepped out of the shadows and began walking toward the pier, each step taking her further from safety and closer to whatever darkness awaited. The safe house felt different in the pre-dawn darkness, charged with an electricity that had nothing to do with the storm clouds gathering outside. Maya sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long since gone cold, watching Jake pace between the windows like a caged predator. He'd been restless all night, checking locks, testing communication devices, his leather jacket thrown over a chair while he wore only a black t-shirt that revealed the intricate tattoos covering his arms. "They're coming today," he said finally, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for the past hour. It wasn't a question. Maya nodded, one hand instinctively moving to her belly, where the baby had been active all night, as if sensing the tension in the air. "How do you know?" "Marcus went quiet 12 hours ago. Radio silence means they either got him or he's in position." Jake's jaw tightened. "Either way, it's time." The plan they'd crafted was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its execution. Marcus would draw Vincent's men to the old warehouse district on the east side of town, making them think that's where Maya was hiding. Meanwhile, Jake would get her to the federal courthouse, where Agent Rodriguez and her team would be waiting with a full protective detail and a judge ready to hear her testimony. But plans, Maya had learned, rarely survived contact with reality. "I need to tell you something," she said, setting down the mug with hands that trembled slightly. "Before this all goes down, there's something you should know." Jake stopped pacing, his attention immediately focused on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Even now, after everything they'd been through, the way he looked at her made her feel like she was the only person in the world. "The baby," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I found out I was pregnant, Vincent, he wasn't happy. He said it would complicate things, make me weak. He wanted me to get rid of it." Jake's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but his voice remained gentle. "What did you do?" "I told him I'd think about it, bought myself time. But that's when I really started looking at the books, started documenting everything. I knew I had to get out, not just for me anymore." Tears she'd been holding back for months finally spilled over. "This baby saved me, Jake, before I even knew you existed. This baby was already saving me." In 3 quick strides, Jake was beside her, pulling her up into his arms. She felt the solid warmth of his chest against her cheek, smelled the familiar scent of leather and motor oil and something uniquely him that had become home. "You saved yourself," he murmured into her hair. "You made the choice to be brave, the choice to fight." "I'm scared," she admitted, the words muffled against his shirt. "Good. Scared keeps you alive." He pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. "But you're not doing this alone anymore. Whatever happens today, we face it together." The sound of gravel crunching under tires outside made them both freeze. Jake was moving before Maya could even process the danger, his gun appearing in his hand as if by magic while he positioned himself between her and the front door. "Back room," he whispered. "Now." But instead of the violent intrusion they expected, a familiar voice called out, "It's Rodriguez. We're early." Jake didn't lower his weapon until he'd peered through the reinforced peephole and confirmed the agent's identity. Even then, he only partially opened the door, keeping his body as a shield. "Change of plans," Rodriguez said without preamble. Her usually composed demeanor cracked with urgency. "Vincent's people intercepted our communications. They know about the courthouse." Maya's blood turned to ice. "What does that mean?" "It means," Jake said grimly, "we're doing this the hard way." Rodriguez stepped inside, her tactical vest and the submachine gun in her hands, making the gravity of the situation undeniable. "We've got 3 vehicles of hostiles moving toward the courthouse and another 2 heading this way," Marcus managed to get word out before they grabbed him. "Is he alive?" Jake asked. For now, Vincent wants the girl first. Rodriguez's eyes found Maya's. "We can still do this, but we need to move fast and smart. There's a secondary extraction point 15 miles north, military transport standing by." Jake was already moving, grabbing their go-bag and his jacket. "How long do we have?" 20 minutes, maybe less." Maya stood on unsteady legs, one hand on the table for support. The baby chose that moment to kick hard against her ribs, as if protesting the chaos surrounding its peaceful world. She took a deep breath, drawing strength from that tiny life depending on her courage. "Then let's go," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. "Let's finish this." Outside, thunder rumbled ominously, and Maya couldn't shake the feeling that the real storm was just beginning. The safe house felt different in the morning light streaming through the curtains. Maya sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold, watching Jake pace by the window. He'd been like this for the past hour, restless, checking his phone, peering through the blinds at every sound from the street below. "They should have called by now," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. Detective Rodriguez had promised to contact them as soon as the raid was complete. The plan was simple in theory. While Marcus believed Maya was still hiding, the FBI would simultaneously hit his 3 main operations across the city. Bank records had led them to warehouses, offshore accounts, and a network of corruption that reached deeper into the police force than anyone had imagined. Maya's phone buzzed against the table. Jake was beside her in 2 quick strides as she looked at the screen. "Unknown number," she whispered. Jake nodded grimly. "Answer it. Speakerphone." Her finger trembled slightly as she accepted the call. "Hello? Maya?" Marcus's voice filled the kitchen like poison. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" Jake's jaw clenched, but he stayed silent, letting Maya handle it while he quickly texted Rodriguez. "It's over, Marcus," Maya said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Whatever you're planning, just stop." A cold laugh echoed through the speaker. "Over? Sweetheart, it's just beginning. Your FBI friends hit empty warehouses this morning. Amazing how quickly information travels when you have the right people in the right places." Maya's heart plummeted. Beside her, Jake's phone lit up with an incoming call from Rodriguez. He declined it, keeping his focus on the conversation. "I have something that belongs to you," Marcus continued, "or rather, someone." The sound of a struggle came through the phone, followed by a familiar voice. "Maya? Maya, don't—" "Sarah," Maya gasped, recognizing her neighbor's voice before it was cut off. "The old packaging plant on Industrial Boulevard. You know the one, where David used to work before he started asking too many questions. Come alone, and maybe your friend here won't end up like your late husband." The line went dead. Jake was already moving, grabbing his leather jacket and checking his gun. "We call Rodriguez. Set up a perimeter SWAT team." "No." Maya stood, her hand protectively over her belly. "You heard him. He has people everywhere. Sarah dies the moment he sees police cars. Maya, this is exactly what he wants. You can't— I can't let another innocent person die because of me." Her voice broke slightly. "Sarah was just trying to help. She has a daughter, Jake, a little girl who needs her mother." Jake stopped, his back to her, shoulders tense. When he turned around, his eyes held a familiar, dangerous glint. "Then we don't do it his way." "What do you mean?" He pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. "I mean, Marcus isn't the only one with connections in dark places." He hit dial. "Tommy, it's Jake. I need a favor. The kind your crew specializes in." Maya watched as Jake spoke in low, urgent tones, using words like perimeter, extraction, and minimal noise. When he hung up, he turned to her with something that might have been a smile if it hadn't been so sharp around the edges. "My old MC had some members who went legitimate, security consulting mostly. Tommy's got a team that can be in position in 20 minutes. They're good at being invisible. Jake, I can't ask you to..." "You're not asking. I'm telling you how this is going to work." He stepped closer, his hands gentle on her shoulders despite the steel in his voice. "We go together. My people create a distraction while I get you and Sarah out. Rodriguez and the FBI can clean up the mess afterward." Maya studied his face, seeing the determination there, the protective fury that had been building since the moment they'd met. "This isn't your fight anymore. You could walk away." "Could I?" His thumb traced her cheek. "Could I really just leave you to face this alone?" She leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his presence. The baby stirred in her womb as if responding to the tension in the room. "What if something goes wrong? Then we'll face it together." He pressed his forehead against hers. "I made you a promise, Maya. I keep my promises." Outside, a motorcycle engine rumbled to life somewhere in the distance. Jake's phone buzzed with a text from Tommy, in position. "Ready when you are." Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the moment settling around them. When she opened them again, Jake was watching her with patient intensity, waiting for her decision. "Okay," she whispered. "But we do this smart. No unnecessary risks." Jake nodded, already reaching for his keys. "Time to end this." As they headed for the door, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that the next few hours would determine not just whether they survived, but who they would become when the dust finally settled. The warehouse felt like a tomb in the pre-dawn darkness, filled with shadows and the metallic scent of old machinery. Maya pressed herself against the cold concrete wall, one hand instinctively protecting her belly while the other gripped the phone Jake had given her. The baby had been restless all night, as if sensing the danger that surrounded them. Jake moved like a ghost through the maze of abandoned equipment, his leather jacket barely making a sound as he checked each corner methodically. 3 days had passed since they'd discovered the extent of Marcus's corruption, and now the net was closing around them. The evidence they'd gathered painted a picture so damning that powerful people would kill to keep it buried. "They're here," Jake whispered, returning to her side. His face was grim in the dim light filtering through grimy windows. 2 cars, maybe 6 men. Professional setup. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. "The FBI contact you mentioned won't be here for another hour." Jake's jaw tightened. "We're on our own until then." The sound of heavy boots echoed through the building, accompanied by low voices coordinating their search. Maya recognized one of them, Detective Rodriguez, Marcus's partner. The betrayal cut deep, knowing how many times she'd trusted these men with her life. Jake's hand found hers in the darkness, steady and warm. "Remember what we talked about? If something happens to me, you take the back exit and head for the motorcycle. Don't look back, don't hesitate. Just run." "Jake, no." "Maya." His voice carried a weight that silenced her protests. "That baby needs you alive. Promise me." Before she could answer, a beam of light swept across their hiding spot. Jake pushed her deeper into the shadows behind a massive generator, then stepped away, drawing their attention. Maya bit her lip to keep from crying out as she watched him disappear into the maze of machinery. The warehouse erupted in chaos, shouting voices, running footsteps, the harsh clatter of metal on concrete. Maya crouched in her hiding spot, every instinct screaming at her to help Jake, to not abandon him to face this alone. But the life growing inside her kept her frozen, torn between love and responsibility. A gunshot cracked through the air, then another. Maya's breath caught in her throat. In the distance, she could hear Jake's voice, taunting their pursuers, leading them away from her position. He was sacrificing himself to give her a chance to escape. "Find the woman," Rodriguez's voice carried across the warehouse. "She's the real prize. Without her testimony, they've got nothing." Maya's hands shook as she fumbled for the phone, trying to call the FBI contact. The screen's glow seemed impossibly bright in the darkness, a beacon that might give away her position. No signal. The warehouse's metal structure was blocking everything. More gunshots, closer this time. The sound of something heavy hitting the ground made her stomach lurch. She pressed her face against the cold concrete, fighting waves of nausea that had nothing to do with pregnancy and everything to do with terror. Then, silence fell like a shroud over the warehouse. Footsteps approached her hiding spot, slow and deliberate. Maya held her breath, praying the baby would stay still, that her racing heart wouldn't somehow give her away. A flashlight beam swept the area, pausing just inches from where she crouched. "I know you're here, Maya." Rodriguez's voice was almost conversational. "Your boyfriend led us on quite a chase, but it's over now. Come out, and maybe we can work something out. Think about your baby." The threat in his words was unmistakable. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her. If she stayed hidden and they found her anyway, she'd have given up for nothing. If she surrendered, maybe she could buy time, find an opportunity. The decision was taken from her when a hand grabbed her arm, yanking her from the shadows. Rodriguez's partner, Detective Coleman, dragged her into the open where Rodriguez waited with two other men she didn't recognize. Their expensive suits and cold eyes marked them as the real power behind this conspiracy. "Where is he?" Maya demanded, searching their faces for any sign of Jake's fate. Rodriguez's smile was cruel. "Your guardian angel? Let's just say he won't be riding to anyone's rescue anymore." The words hit her like physical blows, but Maya forced herself to stand straighter. She thought of Jake's sacrifice, of the courage he'd shown her, of the love that had grown between them in the darkest of circumstances. She wouldn't let his death be meaningless. "You're too late," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "The evidence is already out there. Killing me won't stop what's coming." One of the suited men stepped forward, his expression patient but deadly. "We'll see about that, Mrs. Chen. We'll see about that." Outside, the first hints of dawn painted the horizon, and in the distance, the faint sound of approaching sirens carried on the morning air. The morning sun cast long shadows across the safe-house porch as Elena packed the last of her belongings into a small duffel bag. 3 weeks had passed since that terrible night, and her bruises had faded to pale yellow reminders of how close she'd come to losing everything. The baby kicked gently against her ribs, as if sensing the significance of this moment. Marcus emerged from the kitchen, 2 steaming mugs in his weathered hands. The leather jacket that had first terrified her now seemed like armor protecting something infinitely precious underneath. He'd barely left her side since the confrontation with Vincent, watching over her with the fierce protectiveness of a guardian who'd finally found his purpose. "Coffee for me, herbal tea for you," he said, settling beside her on the worn wooden steps. "Figured you'd want the caffeine-free stuff." Elena accepted the mug gratefully, inhaling the soothing chamomile scent. "I still can't believe it's over. Really over." Vincent's looking at 25 to life minimum, his organization scattered to the winds. "You're safe, Elena. You and the baby both." She studied his profile as he gazed across the quiet valley. Something in his voice carried a note of finality that made her chest tighten with unexpected fear. "Marcus? What aren't you telling me?" He was quiet for a long moment, rolling the coffee mug between his palms. "I've been thinking about what comes next. You've got a new identity, clean documentation, enough money to start fresh anywhere you want. The world's your oyster now." "Our world," she corrected softly. "Isn't it?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Elena felt her heart begin to race as understanding dawned. "You're leaving." "I'm not the settling down type, sweetheart. Never have been." His voice was gentle but resolute. You need stability, normalcy, a good life for that kid. I'm just a broken-down biker with more enemies than friends and a past that'll always catch up eventually." Elena set down her mug with trembling hands. "That's not true. You saved us. You chose to be something different. For a moment, maybe. But I can't change what I am, Elena. The club's restructuring, and they need someone they trust to oversee the transition. Make sure the criminal elements stay buried for good. That's my world, not this." He gestured to the peaceful valley around them. "So that's it?" Her voice cracked with emotion. "After everything we've been through, you're just going to walk away?" Marcus turned to face her fully, and she saw her own pain reflected in his dark eyes. "You think this is easy for me? These past few weeks with you, they've been the best of my life. But I won't trap you in my world. You deserve better than looking over your shoulder, wondering if my past is going to come knocking again. Don't I get a say in what I deserve?" Elena's hand moved protectively to her belly. "This baby is going to ask about you someday. What am I supposed to tell them, that their guardian angel decided he wasn't good enough to stay?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Marcus reached out, his calloused hand covering hers on her stomach. For a moment, his resolve wavered. Tell them I loved you both enough to let you go." Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks. "Love isn't about letting go, Marcus. It's about fighting for what matters, even when it's terrifying. You taught me that." A motorcycle engine rumbled in the distance, growing louder as it approached. Marcus stood, his expression hardening back into the mask she remembered from their first meeting. "That's Tommy. He's here to take you to your new life." Elena rose shakily, her heart breaking with each word. "What about our new life?" For a moment, his composure cracked completely. He pulled her into his arms, holding her with desperate intensity. She felt his chest shudder against her cheek, heard the barely controlled emotion in his voice. "I'm not a fairy tale prince, Elena. I'm just a broken man who got lucky enough to save an angel." "You're wrong," she whispered against his chest. "You're my hero. You'll always be my hero." The motorcycle pulled up, and Tommy killed the engine respectfully. Marcus pulled back, cupping Elena's face in his hands one final time. "If you ever need anything, if you're ever in trouble, you call Tommy. He'll know how to reach me." He kissed her then, pouring 3 weeks of unspoken love and a lifetime of goodbye into that single moment. When they broke apart, Elena saw tears tracking down his weathered cheeks. "Take care of yourself, sweetheart, both of you." As Tommy helped her into the car, Elena watched Marcus grow smaller in the rear window. He stood on that porch like a statue, hands clenched at his sides, until the valley curved and he disappeared from view. The road ahead was uncertain, but she carried something unbreakable now, the knowledge that love could bloom in the darkest places, and that sometimes angels really did wear leather and ride steel.